Have you ever started a duel and you realize what deck your opponent's playing and thought, oh god, it's this deck? And then the dread just starts kicking in because you know you're just gonna have a miserable time because you hate the deck that much. Or the opposite, when your opponent plays a deck that you like or at least interested in, and you start thinking, this is such an interesting deck, I wonder how they're gonna pilot it. These are 5 decks that I hate and 5 decks that I love. And for this particular video, I am excluding decks that I've played this year. So Branded, ABC, Blue Eyes, Chimera, Dark World, you know, all that stuff, that is excluded. I think I've talked about it on the channel before, but for whatever reason, Sword Soul is just my arch nemesis deck. Like, it does not matter what I do to this deck, it just kind of keeps going. I've had multiple people come up to me with multiple ways to defeat it, and none of them seem to work for me. Some people tell me to just imperm the Moye. I try that. They do their combos anyways. I've tried making so that they can't get a Sword Soul token onto the board. It doesn't matter. They just go into their combo anyway. They just have a Taya in hand, or the level 6 that they have, they just summon that along with Taya, and they just do their combo anyways, and then for whatever reason, Konami decided to bring Protoss back, they end on that. It's just incredibly frustrating for me to go against Sword Soul. Like, I know how to technically beat it, but I just can't. And on top of that, they just set Blackout so that they can just do a negate and then destroy 2 things I control. And then my turn's basically done. So yeah, I don't know what it is about Sword Soul specifically, but I just can't most of the time. Like, there's been very few instances where I've actually been able to beat this deck. I don't get it. I really don't. And it's becoming so frustrating to me that I can technically beat it, but I just can't in practice. I wish I played this deck when it was meta. I think I would have liked this deck. I think the only reason why I really hated this deck was because it was meta and I was just trying to be an anti-meta troll, basically. I don't know. Anyways, Orcust. I do like how it just kind of does all its plays in the graveyard. It feels spells, turns everything to quick effects. Outside of doing the VFD and Azathoth lock, I don't think the deck is unfair, or at least it wasn't unfair outside of those 2 things. The deck's very fair. In toss format, they use Phantom Knights to get 2 Fog Blades onto the board, and now they can go into Runic and Bestial plays, which you would think that a deck that relies on the graveyard would hate the Bestials, but the deck doesn't care about the Bestials. It does effectively the same thing that Runic Synchro does, which we'll get more into that later, but it has a couple different routes of getting there that are different from Runic Synchro. I think what this deck excels at doing is creating multiple layers of interruption. Like in Toss format, you had the 2 Fog Blades, as previously mentioned, you had Rusty Bardich, and Dingirsu, which you can revive on your opponent's turn. And if you have a Orcust Link monster on board, you have your Crescendo. There's just so many layers of interruption that can be utilized by the deck. I think it might be a surprise to most people that I don't like Purrely. To me, there's just no clear way of interacting with the deck. Every single time I try, they just go off anyways. That's what it seems like to me, at least. So there's no real way to interact with the deck. So maybe I could just board break it, but you don't have a chance to even board break it because during your standby phase, they draw 4 cards off of the XEs that they already have, and then also going into X-Purrely Noir. By the way, did I mention that X-Purrely Noir is unaffected when it has 5 or more materials, which it will by the time you get to this point? So here we are with a beefy cat that you can't deal with, which it does go away after the next turn, but also your opponent has a way to put it back onto the board. And it's just frustrating to just look down the eyes of this cat and be like, I can't do anything against this. But it wouldn't even get to the next turn because I'm probably going to be dying on that turn with someone that OTKs basically, you know, by just having everything and just attacking multiple times until I just die. So this is a deck that I actually did play. Not recently. Fire King, even without the Snake Eye engine, I think it's a very cool and interesting deck. And what you get out of that is multiple interruptions and just setting up your graveyard for other plays. You know, we have Ponix that can search out either Sanctuary or Skyburn, which acts as interruption. It has a really nice monster negate, and it has Kirin that can summon itself by destroying one of your cards, or if it's destroyed, it can summon something from the graveyard and destroy something on your opponent's board, acting as interruption. And you can get that triggered by going Onslaught of Fire King by destroying Kirin and just reviving something in the graveyard, which is probably going to be Arvada. Fire King, with or without the Snake Eye engine, I think it's just a really cool deck. I'm going to be completely original here. I think Flu is frustrating to play against. Here's something incredibly frustrating. They summon either Eaglin or Rabina, and I think the objectively correct thing to do here is use Imperm on either one. But I stopped trying to chain Imperm to either one of those a long time ago. The reason why is because the second I do that, they're just going to chain one of their quick plays to get the bird off the board and then gain 500 life points with one of them and then do their combo anyways. And speaking of which, they have Map, the field spell. So the very second I normal summon, they're gonna normal summon too, and it becomes our turn. But even if I don't normal summon, they just flip up the trap card to just do it anyways. And then all of a sudden, I'm staring down M-Pen and Apex Avian, or maybe even Ryza makes an appearance, and I just don't play the game that day. Or they just have Featherstorm set, and I just don't get to do anything that turn. I played Telements right up until the two Millers were just banned outright, but I still do see people playing with it today. There are some variants that I want to try out, but the way the deck plays is a very skill-intensive deck, and that really just showed in the mirror match when it was tier 0. You know, when both players were just kind of playing on each other's turns, and it was fun and interactive. It's not like they were trying to shut each other down, it was just a very interactive game. I think that was one of the more interactive formats for a while now, except for the people that weren't playing tier. And again, it's one of those decks that kind of has multiple layers of interruption. It's not relying on any lockouts or anything like that. It's relying on layers of interruption and being able to play in your opponent's turn. On paper, I think Sprite is just kind of mid, but it's just frustrating for me to play against. For example, they normal summon Jet to search out a starter. So, Imperm Jet so they don't get starter. Cool. Special summon blue, special summon red, Xyz for gigantic, and then use the effect to summon one from deck. By the way, when they do that, you don't get to summon monsters above level 2 either, so they're protected from the Nibiru because reasons. But continuing the combo, they go into Sprint to send the Nimble card, and they use that effect to bring out 2 more Nimble cards to Xyz into totally awesome. So now they have a Monster Negate and a Omni Negate, which isn't all that much, technically. But they also set interruptions. And hey, they also have access to Nightmare Corruptor Ibli. And if they do that, they lock you out of your action deck except for Link monsters, which if you're a Link deck, you don't care. I'm using a Fusion deck right now, so I very much care. But I don't have much room talking because, you know, the puppet. I think Runic Synchro is the only Runic deck that I've ever held any respect for. And I think that's because it really shows the creativeness of this game. You know, the deck's using the Runic to get a level 2 out, and then it uses some of the branded stuff to get a level 4 tuner onto the board to go into Triad Master to draw, and it uses Bestials for you to go into level 10s like Dissipator. And then you also have the runic spells just to give yourself a little bit more protection. I've never played the deck myself. I would like to at some point in the future, but it's just an interesting deck. If Sword Soul is the bane of my existence, then Hero is the torment of my existence. I do not understand why people like this deck, and that's fine. People don't understand why I like Branded so much, which, that's fine. Here's my problem with Hero. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to get out one of 3 floodgates. You have Darklaw to just banish anything that goes into your graveyard, and if you add a card, they can just rip it out of your hand. Or they end on Dark Angel to negate every single spell that resolves. And by the way, if both Dark Angel and Darklaw are on the board, you're not winning that with Forbidden Droplet, because you have to send to Graveyard for Forbidden Droplet to work. And since you can't send to Graveyard under Darklaw, you can't do that. Or Floodgate number 3, Plasma, to just skill drain the entire board. And by the way, all this is all backed up by DPE and my favorite contact? No, my favorite hero. My favorite whatever this trap card is. So all that setup is just to protect whatever Floodgate they end on. I think the only real way to deal with Hero is to let them build their board, and then they go, end of main phase, you drop Nibiru. That's the only way I can think of to really deal with Hero. With ABCs, I can handle it a little bit better, because they try to do increase, I just banish increase, and their combo kind of dies there. But in every other deck, if I'm not running Nibiru, I'm just kind of screwed. I think I mentioned this on the channel before, but Odd Eyes is the deck that came back to the game with. That was the very first deck back 10 years ago. I decided, this looks fun. I'm gonna build it. 10 years ago, I was just browsing, looking for Yu-Gi-Oh! Online, which by that point, Yu-Gi-Oh! Online had already been dismantled and forgotten about. And I think I found the Dueling Network. And then I saw a new type of summoning mechanic coming out, Pendulum Summoning. And I think every other Yu-Gi boomer would have looked at Pendulum Summoning and said, this is ridiculous, I'm not playing the game. I, for whatever reason, saw pendulums and thought, this is neat. It's both a monster and a spell, and there's these 2 skills that you have to stay within the limit of to summon a few monsters. These monsters are kind of neat, and I was just kind of drawn to Odd Eyes, and that was the first deck I just built and brought to a tournament. It does have sentimental value to me. I thought Pendulum Summoning was interesting. At the very least, it was different from what I remember Yu-Gi-Oh! But let me know down below what decks you absolutely despise, or decks that you kind of admire. And while you're down there, subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.